Hello. Welcome to episode 1 of the End of the Beginning podcast. In this episode, we discuss the beginnings of the podcast and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we chat about the purpose and place of authenticity in our lives, the evolution of parenting and interacting with intensity versus reacting. And we also talk about the role of trauma as a teacher. We hope you enjoy what you hear, and if you'd like to submit any questions for upcoming episodes, you can contact us at theendofthebeginningpodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can find us on YouTube and Instagram. Thanks for listening.
This is exactly how it should start. Or we talk about what we think this is as a form of introduction to the audience.
Yeah, great idea.
We're already recording, hey?
Yeah. So you can just start.
I could. So my feeling is that anything anybody does, they're the product that they bring to it.
Sure.
Which means the accumulation of everything they have and haven't done. Mm-hmm. The amount of authenticity they've been able to bring to anything and therefore stack is the summation of their, personality, their Paul-hood or their Luke-hood. That's me. There you go. That was inauthentic. That was a bit forced. But so that is what they bring. So that could take the form, in this instance, of my intention for this is that you've got two men who are friends, who have been spiritually curious for a long time in different and overlapping ways, and are also dads, and have also had the grace, good fortune, and kind of like personal growth opportunity of being in deep spousal relationship, which is a code for saying married.
Yeah.
And that's inherently relatable, right? So I think there's a lot of people who are trying to work through a relationship. There's a lot of people who are trying to work through a connection to something grander, pulled towards something bigger, meaning, purpose, or just a higher way of living, or a better, a fluid, more fun way of living. And then they're also raising kids that they really want to get out of the way of, or to facilitate the best kind of childhood possible so that the kids can be as fully themselves as possible, which circles back to, I think that's all you want a marriage for, is to share with another person more and more fully yourself. All you want spiritual pursuit for, or psychological growth, EQ, expansion, whatever it is to just be a bit more yourself every day. And certainly for our children, we want them to be able to have that as well, with as little constraint as possible, so that our children are as much of themselves. How's that feel to you?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel like this is more like a meditation where we just kind of open ourselves up to the possibility of what can happen. We've always had really great conversations, always had deep conversations. And for me, it's can we get to that place while recording? And if we can, is that something that is worthy of sharing, and for me, it's open. Like it's completely open and just an enjoyable, fun thing to do, to sit down, have some kind of, great conversations and do that together and throw caution to the wind. I mean, I think it'll be all of those things, all of the things that you said, and it'll be all, it's almost like, it feels a little bit like you're describing the journey and I'm more describing the bus that we're getting on. The type of vehicle that we're taking, which is a big open kind of experimental flying carpet.
I hear something even more beautiful. Oh, wait, no, as I let that soak in, I can sort of feel what you mean more. Yeah. but it's like, to me, what you're saying is we're just going to be present and we're going to show up. And if there's value to others, but that's irrelevant. We're just going to show up and be as natural as we can. And that has inherent value.
Yeah.
We can light each other up and work each other into a lather conversationally, finding better and better feeling.
Yeah.
And then if somebody else wants to share in that, then they can.
Great. Yeah.
Whereas mine, in retrospect, had notation of like needing it to be valid.
Yeah, sure.
So that here's the reasons it's valid.
We don't get to decide that. Other people will decide that. And for us, it's more like, was it a fun experience and did you enjoy it? And can we facilitate this on a regular basis? And it's like, if we can do that, then what is there is no problem really. It's just like, let's go have some fun and go for a ride. And aren't we lucky that we get to sit and talk shit for, for an hour or however long it's going to be. And
which is almost literally just turning on a mic to our weekly conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Exactly.
Which makes it incredibly low drag.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, yeah, because and I guess that's the natural bit. So I'm actually really grateful for the reminder that that's what this was. Because I felt clear on it in another moment. It's like, I'm doing a thing I admire other people doing, and I want to do it in a way where I'm considering the audience. It's like, actually, perhaps the best way to consider the audience, and correct me if I'm wrong from your profession, a perspective of your profession, but the best way to consider the audience is not to consider them at all.
No, you totally just do your thing. And if they find you engaging as a human and the conversation stimulating and has information, things that they want, then people will keep listening. And if they don't, then they won't.
It's fascinating the overlap between, because I think that's like definitively the creative process.
Yeah.
As far as I understand it from a distance. The overlap with that and living a spiritual life, both of them are fiercely founded on being as authentic as you can possibly be. Yeah.
It's an interesting one. The authenticity thing seems now like, it seems to be very much in the zeitgeist. And I don't know if it's because of social media or what it is, but authenticity seems like we had this manufactured television, like we've had manufactured movies, we've had all of this manufactured kind of entertainment and infotainment perhaps. And it just feels like now the way social media's gone, it's just like, how do we just break away the facade of all of that stuff? How do we actually talk as humans, and how do we connect with each other in this artificial digital, medium? It seems to be very like, or at least, what I'm seeing and interacting with, it seems to be very, very, poignant and topical right now.
Do you think... So you're describing a phenomenon, but you're describing like a trend as well, right? Like it's getting harder or it's getting more poignant.
Well, I think it's just like it's everybody's searching for it, and now they're searching for it in more places than they've ever searched for it before.
See, you don't? No, I totally do. But there's a wrinkle in there that's like, most conversation about Western culture is it's going off a cliff. Like we're Rome, we've apexed long ago, and now we're just boiling in our own juices.
Yeah, the world's always ending. The sky's always falling.
My perspective, I don't think it's just philosophical. It's a felt thing in my chest. That's me tapping my thorax. That the universe does not make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that can be a bit bypassy at times, but
it's a big one though. Like, it's such a small, short sentence, but it's like the implications of understanding that and living your life accordingly and actually believing it is such a deep philosophical experience.
It's really big because it includes rage and crisis and abuse and also like perhaps in a really pointy way, a prickly way, like what it is to be truly overwhelmed, or what is it to say everything's welcome, everything's perfect as it is, and then to sit with a huge part of yourself authentically writhing in rejection of its imperfection. So it's like you could try to force yourself past that to go, no, everything's perfect. Like part of the perfection is to allow part of your humanity to reject something and go, no, like if somebody dies in your life tomorrow or something and you wanted to jump to a philosophical outlook of them being in a better place or of this being a perfect inflection and part of the nuance and the wrinkle is to have enough spaciousness inside of you, which is not going to be possible immediately, but eventually with something of that magnitude, but eventually to create enough space inside of you to sit with the part of you that utterly rejects it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've deliberately, accidentally found our way back to authenticity. But that is where we find authenticity. It goes, I am this human being. One of the models to look at spiritual life with, it would be or is like the kind of thespian notion that it's theatre.
Mm.
And I have a soul that was never born, never dies.
Mm.
And I'm playing quite voluntarily, quite deliberately, in fact, quite ecstatically. I'm playing a role, and the role's called Luke, and I'm a dad, and I'm all these things. And it's how well can you play the role. So, but the quality of performance is how much can you coexist with what Luke goes through.
And also, when you say that, immediately what comes up in me is, what does well mean?
Exactly.
You know, how well? It's
Yeah.
like, well, do you mean how deeply can you inhabit that character, and how deeply can you connect to all the facets that are available to that character?
Yeah.
You know, like,
I want to simplify it. So I'll start, but acknowledging that it's got so many jump off points where you could tangent into other topics. But to be able to sit with that person and meet him, in this case him, exactly where he is. So let's jump off vocational or relationship success or financial success. Those are all fine. But the core thing is allowing him to be fully as he is. I actually think a beautiful example of this is parenting. So it's not, I think it's sort of benign in its way, but my son this morning is really upset. So my capacity to be with him and meet him as he is without needing to stifle the feeling in any way. So if he's moving through sadness or rage or overwhelm, just to create a space for him to play that out like a actor on a stage, to be fully with that, to play that out. And yeah, we know as parents how tricky that is to also have boundaries. It's like, yeah, you're not allowed to tip the fridge over and kick the living shit out of your sibling. Like, those things aren't okay. So how do you allow for full expression with also boundaries? So like the outer edges of the container, you could say, and that's the dance. That's the duality of parenting, but also everything. We're also parenting ourselves. It's pop culture reparenting.
yeah.
But in this instance, it's like, so coming back, success in that model looks like, how do I let that play out as authentically and fully as possible? So when I move, there's a catalyst, there's a trigger to feel a big old thing. It's very feeling centric. How do I hold space for him to fully manifest in that moment, to fully express? And for me, in an incredibly beautiful, even romantic way, that is how an infinite being is able to experience authenticity. So like, if you could experience all things at once, it's very hard to experience anything at all. The notion in the background to all this is God is everything. There's nothing God is not. And that dwells in us as us. And the capacity to step into an authentic moment where we relate to a world of duality, of highs and lows and pain and relief and male and female and all these different spectrums of variability, to be able to individuate into that personhood. So to have a Paul moment where it's uniquely Paul. There's no other Paul in the world. Sure, there's overlap, thank God, we can relate, but there is no other Paul. And so therefore he's experiencing a unique perspective of the universe. And to allow that to fully bloom is to give a plant the conditions it needs to flower and to fruit. And that's what the universe is up to. It sounds a bit Alan Wattsy. It's like an apple tree apples, a Paul Pauls.
Yeah.
And so how do we allow this Paul to happen? And thankfully or conveniently or whatever, that can take the frame of healthy with a capital F, healthy relationship and healthy finances and all the things you might covet. But it starts with that primary authenticity at its root.
How do you, because I'm sort of trying to think back to when I was younger with younger kids and thinking like, sometimes like you have those crazy mornings where it's like, everything's going wrong. Everything's in a panic. You just want to get the kids out of the house for school. Do you have any mechanisms or anything like that you use to get to that place where you're like, how do I, rather than just reacting? Because, I found myself earlier in my parenthood just reacting to things.
Definitely. I had a reaction this morning just to ground all this in the reality of the mud of the work. Like,
Yeah.
so I'm reluctant to offer method
Mm.
because it can be wonderful and really soothing for when we're really wobbly. But overarchingly, I think method's a thing we use to grow, and then we outgrow, and we keep coming back to ourselves over and over. The idea that Paul is bigger than any method he would use, something as grandiose and storied, historic, ancient even as meditation, is that meditation is something Paul uses because Paul is bigger than meditation. Because your God, it's a doorway. We don't make passionate love to a doorway. If we do, we don't do it for long. We actually want to go through the thing. So as we integrate that into our life in a more and more real way, we use methods, they grow us, they stop growing us, and we put them down.
Yeah.
So methods can, this sort of double-edged sword, but they're necessary because, I think a human incarnation is a method. So coming back to your question, what I'm drawn to straight away is how much I've changed as a parent. I've been in it over a decade now, being, anonymous about my children for the sake of the pod kind of thing. But I'm over a decade in now, and I'm very different to how I was. And your question in first, you are too. And what I've noticed is I'm running out of reasons to get upset with them in a way that isn't squarely my accountability.
Yeah, nice.
That makes sense?
Of course.
So this morning, when it was not the big feeling that came up, it was the timing of it. So I'm on a clock. I have my own version of neurodivergence in my head where I'm like, oh, I just lost 4 minutes. Now we're 4 minutes behind. I'm cool with that. Watch me declare how cool I am by saying I'm cool out loud. And then we're now going to jump in the car. Hey, teeth are done. This was a sophisticated morning parentally. Teeth are already done. Bags are already packed. Socks are on, man. I came to play this morning. And then there was a garment complaint. What's the word? Not discretion. A disagreement on pants, and all of a sudden the pants had to be changed for shorts. They were incredibly stifling, and there was no space for diplomacy. It was full 10 out of 10 emotional eruption out of my youngest and over the pants, and there was no space. And I, in that moment, unconsciously decided to push back and argue with him and say, this is not okay. We've had all morning to discuss the pants. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, wow, this happens less often now, doesn't it? And thankfully, there is this notion of repair where I can see that I'm dropping the ball without tearing myself to shreds. It's so reasonable to set up, to orchestrate and coordinate and choreograph a whole morning of organized stuff. And then at the last second, as if someone deliberately wants to get to an emotional state to release in a safe place, to jam in a feeling they've overlooked all morning. So they're going to cause a blow up, pull the rug out from under you to see if they can get you upset or to see if they can just have a release. And they do. And I noticed that I made an agreement with myself because we were so crammed for time. There wasn't the space to have a big cuddle on the couch and let it all out because we're going to miss the start of school or whatever, that I made a decision to tell him how hard and stressful it was, which is, it's not criminal and it's not evil or dark, but it's pretty unintelligent because there's a kid deeply in his sympathetic nervous system really triggered. And then there's me trying to get him to consider an adult perspective.
Hard for a little one.
Hard and redundant. But also I have compassion. I'm sitting in witness to him and not doing a very good job of it at ground zero, at the epicenter of it. But I'm also in witness to myself enough to go like, I can understand how you drop the ball there. And it's kind of nice to notice that I'm not there as often as I used to be. So if there's a pointing to a method in all that, a guiding energy signature or something, it might be like we're noticing that there is less and less reason to stop space holding for the child and to switch to making them accountable for how they've made me feel. Some of that's okay because it's respect. I think it's worth defining anything you're holding space for, meaning like someone's moving through an emotion and I suppose parentally, you're kind of always doing that for your kids. I am responsible for them, not the other way around. It's also worth noting that, like, while that's a fierce dedication, so if I'm going to hold space for you right now, you're going to hold space for me right now. The premise is that you allow me to move through my process without any energies in you judging or constraining or controlling and funneling in a certain direction. You just allow it to be as it is. And yeah, it's the other side of that coin is that the one stepping into the container, the receiving of that gift, doesn't rip the house off its stumps while it's in there. They don't burn the thing to the ground. So that we have like a reciprocal reverence, if you like, for the gift going both ways. And at its core, it is a gift to submit yourself to a container of another one.
Yeah.
Which is coming back to the start of our conversation. That's the juice. Like when two people can come together, forgetting who's holding space for who in this specific example, because it will interchange. We'll pass the mic, as it were. It's bliss to hold space for the blossoming of a flower. That's what it is. That's why we're drawn to. To me, that's how you make service to another human being equitable. Is you get so much out of it. Service for service's sake feels like faking it till you make it, and we're destined to discover that actually this is the best way for Paul to Paul, is to create a space where he gets to connect, and that's nourishing, and gets to observe, and in a symbiotic, greater than the sum of its parts way, drink in, consume. Sounds dangerous as a verb, but to consume the energy that's emitted when a flower blooms. Might be too poetic for some. There's me considering the audience again. But it's so beautiful. And that way you can be yourself and be connected to yourself, and the enlightened version of self-orientation, self-regard.
Yeah.
And if you might have introduced the concept to me, but talking about counterfeit moments where we misrepresent ourselves by pretending to be something we're not. You often through people pleasing or through helping another, whereas this is the way to stay connected to yourself while you help another. And conveniently and beautifully, this has been happening on autopilot to some degree already. That's the bliss of being with a person while they move through stuff, helping to help. Explain to me the nourishment. Did I get anywhere?
Yeah.
Near your question?
Like if I was going to interpret it, for me, it feels like you're saying like the first step is to acknowledge that that's possible, and that it's a beautiful thing to do, to open yourself up to be able to hold space for somebody.
So just clarify, what's possible?
That it's possible to catch something. For example, in the moment of intensity, you always have a decision. You can always decide how you want to go about something. And even when those feelings are really super intense, you can catch them. You can create a container, and you can be there of service to this person that you really love and care about. And sometimes, most of the times for me, but sometimes you don't catch it, and that's okay. Like feels like step 2 is like, not that we're putting a formula together, but it feels like the second part of that is if you don't catch it, that's all right. Go gently into this space with as little judgment of yourself as you can. Yeah, and yet inherent in that story, in that capturing of it is, I don't know, the dedication to, like, I want to say discipline, but I don't like that either. That feels a bit methodical, but the authenticity in which you show up and you go, we're moving down a black run, in the skiing sense, and it's fast and it's wobbly, but you know that it's possible. And so as those speed wobbles come out, or you have a stack or whatever, it's like, well, cool. I don't pretend to be the best in the world at this. Yeah. And even the best in the world is humbled by, the fact this goes on forever. We never get it done. Yeah. So it can be a bit spiritual bypassy, but that's a gift, because we never run out of opportunities to grow in this, and you keep showing up and showing up and showing up. And what I can't avoid but think of when we describe it that way is that we're not only are we creating a container for our children to be themselves and to normalize themness. So if my kid was called Jeremy, the Jereminess of it all,
That's the key. That's the blooming of that flower. It's a unique aroma and energy signature. So we're creating a container so that can emerge into the world. We're the caretakers of that in that way. But if you notice, like there's not really Luke-ness, if I'm the father of that kid, in that. It's about the Jeremy-ness. So I'm creating a neutral sort of container.
So how do you get to that space where you are, like Luke is not triggered from stuff from his childhood?
Yeah.
Luke knows that it's possible. Like I'm just trying to think back to when I began being a parent. You know, like I'm so in my stuff,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like that's the guts of it.
Mm.
And for me, once I understood that I had an option to either interact or react, you know, that was how I defined it for myself. It's like I can just keep on just reacting to this and throwing the energy back, or I can actually interact with this and I can hold the energy and I can look at it. I can decide what I want to transmute it into, and then I can interact from that perspective.
So 2 things to begin with, and we've already touched on them, but like this is a lifelong body of work. I don't think we perhaps don't stop being a parent. We've got young kids, so we don't know that, but I suspect that this goes on. My parents have become more peer-like in some ways, but never truly peers. So there is a sort of a sacredness to the dynamic that proceeds on both the negative, contracted, uncomfortable end and the expansion, sacred being kind of, you know, that's my dad and that's my mom. And they'll always be incredibly special because I only have one of each of those. So the fact the journey goes on, and so we can afford to make mistakes, like we've said. Damn, I lost the other thread.
Well, just as you said that, I was like, I guess that's the third thing for me. I know you didn't want to put together a formula, but I'm just like, that the third thing is like, you are going to make mistakes. It's linked to the judgment, isn't it? Like, try not to judge yourself. You know, like to understand that you are unfolding. Like you're like, to use your analogy of the blossoming flower, it's like you're unfolding. There's nothing wrong here.
Oh yeah. And this is teasing it up and out.
Yeah. Well, just it's more to like try and draw some I guess juice from where you've been as a parent to go. Some people are
how do you create the container?
Some people are exactly. Some people are where we are in their journey with parenthood. Some people are far more advanced than what we are, and some people are still at the beginning of their journey of parenthood, and they want to do a good job. Like that's something that everybody seems to. I just want to do the best for my kid, you know.
Yeah,
unless you're some weird like deadbeat vibes.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to do it, but I guess everyone can only start from where they are. So the premise that I don't know, I can't find any more much interest in morality. I find increasingly morality is just like there's so much understanding of where people are starting from. This might be a volatile thing to insert, but this concept of morality, it feels like moral structure is something that we introduce or include, utilize in lieu. So we use, it's like a fake it till you make it. I don't trust myself enough, or we don't trust ourselves enough, because, you know, morality tends to be societal, like lending itself to legal stuff, whatever, that we don't trust ourselves enough to be good little boys and girls. So we'll have some rules.
Yeah.
Which certainly makes sense. Like you have that for a house or whatever. Like you teach a kid that, like, sure, you're allowed to get angry. You're not allowed to punch your sibling, whatever.
It's also intrinsic in society. It seems to be like we have.
Certainly. But I think there's a natural thing, and I'm not advocating for the dissolution of morality, but it just seems less and less relevant as I grow. And I'm going to continue growing for forever. So that's a safe thing to play with. That there has been real growth and I continue to grow forever, never really arriving. So I can afford to talk about the fact that I've grown a lot because there's so much left to grow, you know. I'm talking indirectly about, you know, ego inflation and things there. But yeah, so like there becomes a natural way of being that morality, I can afford to put that fake it till I make it moral structure aside as I grow more and more into my own authenticity and into my own understanding in an embodied way, not a philosophical way, that there's only one of us in the room. So when I do something that hurts another, I hurt myself, and it becomes intolerably inefficient.
So to clarify that, you're talking about the Godhead, like God is all there is, kind of that space?
I suppose so. That there's, well,
I'm just trying to clarify because there'll be people listening to go, "What the hell is that guy talking about?"
So the idea that, you know, from a astronomical point of view or something, like underneath everything there's nothing. There's the same we're all made of the same stardust. And from the spiritual perspective, in most modalities of spiritual philosophy, let's say, we are all made of the same essence.
So one super consciousness.
Yeah,
in
underneath
shards of itself.
all things. And that you could assert that that's why when you hurt someone and you know you've done it and you can feel their suffering, so functional empathy, that's what empathy is that there's actually only one heart underneath all of that, and that's why we feel it. And yet there's vast examples of the individuation as well. I'm not actually really sure how to argue for the oneness of things. It feels like such a given.
But I have friends who they don't live their life like that.
Yeah.
That's not their everyday beings.
Yeah. Oh, and there's healthy but apparent variability across. I just went camping with a bunch of deeply spiritual people in an eclectic range of ways, and there's plenty of variation. There's also plenty of overlap.
Yeah.
I think, again, the whole fake it till you make it, like there's practicing a philosophy and playing with it and loving the idea and feeling resonant with the idea, like looking at a piece of art on the wall, or perhaps a statue that you might, in a Hindu sense, in a devotional sense, like you're praying to a statue, which is plenty of human beings on the planet today still do that. So you're pitching to a vibration or signature of some variation of God or higher being or whatever, and you attune to it over and over and over through mantra or chanting, whatever. Until you're bringing yourself, by focusing on that vibration, you're attuning to it over and over and over through, in this case, worship. And then eventually you attune to it so much that you become it. So I just described embodiment. So if you have a tendency towards rage in conflict, and then over time you sit in that space and you create space for it and you create space for it, it's like eventually you've created enough. You could just say, I've been with the feeling enough that it can alchemize into something.
What does that look like? Give a practical, like for me, because I look at that, like, what does that look like? So sitting with rage, like just seething inside yourself, or do you mean going to the gym, beating the crap out of the boxing bag, or do you mean all of the above? Like familiarizing yourself with rage to the point where you're so personal with it.
Well, if you were, let's say you had a fight with your spouse and you experience something very familiar, maybe you feel this disrespect and this sorrow or this anger as a consequence. And you might say, in that instance, a convenient example would be, I'm overwhelmed. Now, even
Very
that.
Shakespearean of you.
That's in the thespian thing. I'm overwhelmed. That's a much, much better than saying, fuck you.
Yeah.
Fuck you. How dare you? You always do this. I think it's indicative of I haven't become the feeling itself. There is a spaciousness around the feeling, but I can see the forest for the trees enough to go, this birch tree is overwhelmed, and I'm saying that I am embodying this right now. But there's spaciousness enough around it.
Yeah.
So the next practical step might be, I'm overwhelmed and I need a minute. I'm going to go to the beach and I'm going to howl at the moon. I'm going to kick the shit out of a punching bag, whatever. You could say that might move some of the stuff that's stuck in your body, synonymous with that feeling. But I'm wary of giving a definition that's a bit old hat, but one does come to mind, and that is like, the premise is that feeling arose at some point in time past, in the past, right? And in that moment, there wasn't enough emotional capacity or spiritual evolution to hold space for that thing, and it doesn't go away. Like energy can be neither created nor destroyed. It simply is. It displaces or transforms into another form. I guess that's a physical, like physics.
Yeah.
So the same's true.
So you pack it away with that intensity still attached to it, or the
repression
overwhelm.
would be the verb, yeah. So then that doesn't go away. In fact, it sits somewhere, stored away, repressed.
So every time you get angry, for example, you're pulling out all of that hurt and anger from the past. In a way.
With certain tones of anger, yeah. There'll be, often people can present as quite people-pleasy and repressed, and they haven't experienced their own anger for a long, long time. And I'm drawn straight away to the authenticity of what it would be to feel that anger and the fucking beauty of that anger. because of being reconnecting with themselves. And we talk about blossoming. It's like, well, this is as the petals open of the lotus flower, to use a spiritual cliche, the rust. I don't know why rust feels appropriate. It's a flower. It's probably not rust, but the dirt and the muck and the cobwebs that get purged as it opens up and out is some of that discomfort, and inversely the lightness that's present in the space afterwards. So yeah, to give a basic sequential idea of a process of what it is I couldn't be with it then because I was just a kid, and my parents couldn't help me. They couldn't provide the spaciousness for it, so I'm going to deal with it later. I'm big enough and ugly enough, like we used to say in the 80s, to be with it now. And so here I am. And coming right back to the parenting thing, we're going to provide that container for our kids simultaneously. We're going to embody for them in a demonstration, the most important demonstration for them, how to adult.
Yeah.
So when we fall over, there's a Ramana Maharshi thing. If you fall off a horse, I'm bastardizing it a bit, misquoting it, but if you fall off a horse, get back on the horse. How does it help you to continue your horse-mounted journey to give yourself a hard time for having fallen off the horse? In what way does that help you complete your journey? So to be able to get in the mud and then be okay with being in the mud. To my favorite thing that comes up from my personal journey, and I may have stolen it in some way. I'm sure I drew inspiration from a few things, but hopefully, chiefly, my own life, is that there is, as you grow, there is less and less reason to fall out of love with yourself. So we get expanded and we feel this incredible self-regard, both for the spiritual aspect, which I'm drawing on spiritual culture a bit here, but the part of you that's God, the part of you that, God dwells in you, but God also dwells in you as you, meaning the poleness of it all, the pimples and the wrinkles and the...
Jeez, it's making me self-conscious.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said Paul. That's so deeply stinging. The human aspects.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things is to sit with people and talk about them by name as deity. Wow. It gets
Most
people.
gross
Last
out
week,
or-
a moment of talking to using them by name and saying the God that is manifest as Luke, who raised his voice to his son this morning in a way he had to apologize for 10 minutes later. It wasn't disgusting. There wasn't swearing there. It was just inefficient. And, and there was also thankfully a window to repair afterwards, and probably need to check in on how effective that repair was after school today. So,
I mean, immediately for me, it's like you're obviously aware of that system of conflict and then how important repair is afterwards, and the authenticity of the repair. Like, that was something that for me as a when I was a dad,
a young dad, you mean, yeah.
a young dad, it was really quite confusing. Like I remember the first time I was smacked as a kid. So I grew up in the 70s. And
the brain had to think about what that word meant for a sec.
Yeah, what is a smack? We don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, what was just, it was par for the course back then. That was just how things were done. And I remember the first time I lost it and smacked my son, who was probably like 3. And I didn't whack him, but I, there was enough juice in it for me to just be like, and I felt awful.
Immediately?
Almost immediately. It's that funny thing. It was almost in that same vein as you hear your parents' words coming from your mouth.
Out of your mouth, sure.
Yeah, like that's a crazy trip.
Incredibly humbling moment, I reckon.
Man, when you can when you clock it and you can actually go, I don't even know why I said that. I just said it, like on autopilot. And that felt like the same thing. It's like when this happens, this disrespect happens, when I feel overwhelmed, this is what I do. This is how I solve this problem.
Yeah.
And I remember, just like he probably ran off. I think he almost slammed his sister's fingers in the door or something like that. And I'd asked them to calm down and stop doing what they were doing. And yeah, he ran off, I think. And I just remember feeling terrible. And it was that moment that helped me realize, like, well, you're either going to do something about this or you're just going to repress. You know, you're just going to ignore that feeling. And so,
The feeling that arose as a consequence of the smack?
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Either I'm going to, well, there's only two pathways, right? One is to just ignore what happened.
Mm.
And the other is to go and apologize. And so, because what I wanted from the experience for him was that we stayed connected. I went and apologized. And I remember he was crying and he was on his bed and I sat down next to him and I just said, I'm really sorry for hitting you. I don't know why I did that. I just was getting really cross and I'm trying my best, but sometimes I'm not very good at that. And I'm really sorry and I won't do that again. And that repair was so beautiful because he turned round and saw the human for a second, I guess. I don't know. But for a moment, I stopped being his idea of God that parents are for their children and had a beautiful big hug with him. I probably cried as well. And, you know, there was just this real open, vulnerable moment. And so that never became something that I was ashamed of. Because for me, it became a teaching moment for me to upgrade, you know, to stop that behavior in my lineage and also to go easy on myself, you know, and was almost forgiven by him. Like, I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel like he said something like, "That's okay, Dad," or something like that. And I told him I loved him and he told me he loved me as well. And so, yeah, I think the repair thing, like that's when it really hit home for me. Like if you can fuck up and then you can repair with your kids with, going back right to the beginning, with authenticity, like crack open your chest and admit your failure, admit your, you know, regret at something and truly like meet them on that, you know, open, raw space. Man, kids are so tapped into where they've just come from source, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know, they're so tapped into that it's a, you know, they get it. They totally understand.
I think.
And it became a moment for us to actually connect deeper.
Oh, yeah.
For him to just go, oh, my dad's not perfect. I don't have to be perfect. Like there's so much stuff in it.
So playing with the concept of karma, which there's a better word for like lemon juice that has come out before, which might sound, I don't know, old hat and played out or something. But it still has, like a lot of old things, they still have great efficacy when we can find that kind of authentic root. So the premise there's something I've played with a long time and has felt, you know, a note that penetrates breaks through and demands to be heard in my system is that karma isn't just to go from broken to healed, from unwhole to whole. It's that we go through the trouble, the turbulence, in order to fracture into parts and then come back into our wholeness, not just to be whole, because that's starting from zero and coming back to zero. Something is achieved in the practice of working through a trauma like that, or a karma, you could say. There's a convenience of interchangeability between those terms today, which I think is good and fun. What I'm saying is, it's not just about coming back to whole, because that's neutral. It's actually the karmic work, we're better for having had the trauma. I feel like this is missing from the zeitgeist.
Yeah, depends on what you do with it, doesn't it?
It does, but so when it's, let's
because
say
you can
when
get
it's
beaten down by it, and you can really become a victim from depending on the trauma.
Yeah, that's relevant, and yeah, that's potent in a life, because there are choices on a level. In another way, things are going to get there eventually, and everything returns to wholeness eventually. Whether this is the convenience of the reincarnation thing, that things can go on and on forever. But a thing like in that instance, your relationship with that child is greater because of the the repair. And if it's greater than it was because of the repair, then we have to be willing to look at it's greater than it was because of the smack.
Yeah, of course.
There was love in the smack.
Mm.
You could say it's because he gave
It's
you
like a
the
mechanism.
opportunity to uplift your lineage. We can add whatever narrative we want over the top. But the truth is, in my system at least, is the universe ain't broke. And so as these things arise and as they're met fully, like a container for the plant to blossom fully and to reach its full potential in that moment, let's say, or thereabouts, we're able to integrate the moment, or in this case, the behavior or whatever, the feeling that played through you as you know, it manifests as the physicality of the smack. I should say I'm still struck by the power of you sharing that in that way. I honor that.
Oh, thanks, man.
For sure. That it was a blessing. And it's so hard to play with.
It can become that.
Yeah.
It was so interesting when you brought up, I just want to circle back around, when you brought up karma, because for me, like karma equals judgment. But that's not necessarily true by the sound of how you believe karma to be. When I think of karma, I think of like the murderer in the next life becomes the murdered. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
I think that's the westernization of it.
Yeah, what's more of a purer kind of Eastern version of that?
Well,
like, do you have anything?
I can have a go at it for sure. A karma yogi, karma yoga is the pathway of meeting life exactly as it arises. And the way I've understood it through a background of Hinduism is that you could go to temple, you could go and sit in the Himalayas, you could go and sit in a cave, at the feet of a teacher, and practice and grow that way, or you could stay in your life and just meet it in the detail. And now those two explicit pathways have never really worked in a Western culture. They're still quite Eastern. To disappear from life and be an ascetic isn't a thing that we do. I think if we do, they're called homeless people, vagabonds, whatever, vagrant. So in its origins, it's like rather than doing a specific yogic practice that's dedicating your life to this, you're dedicating to meeting the moment. And I think all these yogic schools bleed into each other in ways that are beautiful, but that would be to make them explicit and separate. For me, karma can be pretty easily overlapped with what we were saying before about I couldn't process that energy fully when it happened. So when this thing happened to me when I was a kid, I was too overwhelmed to meet it.
Right.
The energy doesn't disappear, it gets displaced. So anything that does happen must be processed eventually. We could swap out process for fully lived. It's got to be lived, integrated, embodied, whichever kind of contemporary language works for us. So if a grief happens and which I think an example in my own life that's sort of like shareable easily for me, it was a paramedic for 13 years, and I interface with a lot of stuff. You couldn't possibly process all the things you're interfacing with because it's a perpetual sushi train of crisis. Yeah, going round and round and round. And at least as best as I can understand, there isn't the time to sit and process. Like a duck clashes with another duck and then it needs to ruffle its feathers to reset and go and it can't just keep fighting or it'll end up rather haggard and neurologically kind of bereft and stripped of its own resources. So it needs kind of a yin. If it's had a yang period of intensity, it needs a yin period of decompression and emptiness and relaxation and self-nourishment and all that. So if you're in a circumstance where that's not possible, and we've all experienced those, then things get repressed and you will circle back and the system ain't broke. It just gets displaced. There's only, from a spiritual perspective, there's only here and now. So it's here and now. It's just underneath. Yeah. It's just underneath. A fascinating concept to me these days is, so you've got to go back in time, like the trauma work pathway. You've got to dive in, EMDR or whatever, CBT, whatever it happens to be, both psychological, what's the word?
Systems?
Yeah, systems or methods, yeah. You have to go back into the past to deep dive into that moment and entrain what it was to be a 4-year-old and for that to happen. You can do that. But the reason that works, so reverse engineering it, the reason that works is because that vibrational signature is still in your system now, here and now. So there are ways to work with just getting in touch with the signature and not having to go back into the past. See, one of the manifestational pushbacks on that is that you're just going to, you can get to the core of it, but in the process of doing that, you're recreating a lot of that stuff. I don't have a really firm stance either way. But what I would advocate for anybody wanting to do work like that is that you make it feeling orientated. How does it sit in your body?
Yeah.
How did it land in your body at the time, if you like, and how does it persist in your body now? So that it's deeply feeling orientated. Because feelings now. And the congestion that unprocessed feeling manifests as in your life is also now. And so I think this is the not perhaps the birthing, but the power of body work entering our space more and more. This is a whole other topic, but traditional spirituality has been about transcending up and out. And like anything, it's double-edged. And you can have too much transcension of ascension up and out into higher and higher consciousness and moving towards God all the time. And we can leave behind our humanity. Sort of notion that we came here to forget that we were God and then work our way back to God. It's like there might be other layers to it as well. What if you could work out that you were of the divine and then live a life sponsored by that in a deeply, deeply human way? And my favorite way to understand that is like there's the yang, the masculine of expanding up and out into godhood. And then there's then taking that enlightened consciousness, bringing it back, descending it back down like roots in the ground into our humanity and enlightening what it is to be Luke over and over and over and over. And another one of my favorite and even most romantic concepts is the more of Luke I become, the more service I am to this place. It's got nothing to do with what I do and everything to do with what I am being. The best concept to play with in spirituality is being. It can be the hardest to pin down with language because it's outside of structure. When you love somebody well, you cannot prove it with deed or with description. You've got to be love for that person. Even that, just the words fall short a bit of what it is to love somebody else. Like you are love for your child. You don't do love for your child, right? As soon as we ground it in an example, you can feel it. So being is something we've got to embody. It's something only doable experientially. And if we ignore everything that we've said today, let's say everything that I've said today, that's the only thing worth remembering is you're here to experience yourself, to be yourself. Which sounds like the most kitschy 1992 after school special thing. Just be yourself, man. That's what's really cool, you know?
Yeah.
But in truth, done authentically, that's the only thing that matters. I want to throw a question to you.
I've really enjoyed being the kind of
interview.
Yeah, well, just like, but also like kind of the common. There always has to be a common representation of the common man in any interesting dialogue. You know, you can open it up to people from all walks of life.
It needs to be. I know what you're saying, and it makes sense. Relatability.
Yeah,
this is something a friend of mine, a teacher, would offer. It's the important. You know, you can have all the expansion in the world, but if you're losing proportionately your relatability, where's the value?
Yeah.
So, but there was also incredibly punchy power, and you're talking that story before. Yeah, I think that's far out. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being an earlier version of you as a parent and hearing that? Go, oh my God, people crying in their cars kind of thing. I mean, who cares about the audience, right?
Yeah.
But also driving tears, but also freeway dehydration. Facial.
Freeway dehydration.
Yeah, that could be the name of the pod.
Yeah. I think
All
I
right.
just named it.
This might be agendered. I just saw one that I'd love to ask you.
Yes, go.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I saw one that I thought, I'd love to ask Paul this anyway.
Sure.
So this is from Abbott subscriber to the pod, a fella named Shane. And it's not really in question form, so more conceptual. So let's just see what comes up, hey? He'd love you to discuss manifesting from a place of loss, Multiple areas are full of abundance, but one or two remain stark or completely lacking in abundance. Focusing on the areas of abundance and gratitude feels helpful, but at least at times, I suppose, it's hard not to get sucked down by the lacking in other areas.
I struggle with that myself. So for me, it's, I'm not sure I have a great answer for that, but the manifesting thing for me, I'm a bit late to the game in the manifesting thing, which is kind of fun. Like I remember The Secret. Is that what it was called? The Secret. I remember The Secret coming out and just thinking, what a load of bollocks. Out of this woo-woo stuff. And it's really probably only been the last sort of 5 years of my life that it's even entered into my cognition of like, is this, possible? I guess there's been experiences I've had that have connected me with the divine, I guess. And so then when because I'm quite, I feel like I have quite a strong logical side to myself. And it's almost like I like things to be proven out on multiple planes. And so for me, it's like, that's the idea of manifestation. It's a really nice idea, but it's a bit of a fairy tale. But then when you have an experience of divinity and you realize that you're part of that through direct experience, then the logical connection from there is that if that thing made all of this and you're connected to that thing, then of course you can affect this. That just, it's too simple, it's too elegant, and
satisfies the logical part of it.
It's too logical to not. And so from that space to start to play in that area, I mean, as you know, like for me, the thing's been money. I've always equated a lot of money with kind of badness, and I think like one of my new mantras is I can do good and be rich. Like that's a new mantra, because a lot of people I've seen in my life who've accumulated a lot of wealth have, and it's just the way they've done it, and they're learning their lessons that they need to learn.
There's perfection in the way they're playing that out.
Yeah. Exactly, because that's whatever they're needing to learn, that's how they're getting to that space. But yeah, they've seemed to be miserable, or they've seemed to have not disorders, I wouldn't say that, but almost pathological addiction to either to consumption or to the pursuit of vast capital, and they're never happy. But then you meet the odd person who's super wealthy and both. Really, really happy.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's
comfortable for your logical mind, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. I have various agreements that you're not allowed to exist.
Yeah. And so, and then you just become aware of, well, at least I became aware of just my judgment and then my space in and around that. So the first thing for me is the release of judgment. That's just always, not always, but generally is my first step when I realize something that I'm not happy about, that is not going my way, that is not my, it's like, well, where's my judgment in this? Where am I on this, on this topic or in this space? Because I think you got to own it. The first thing is to realize that you have all the power. Your perspective gives you all the power. So where is your perspective? And if it's in judgment, where is that judgment? And from there, you can start to unpick everything. You can start to realize where you're suppressing, where you're in, negativity. I had a recent realization recently. Maybe I'm waffling a bit, but
not to me.
This realization recently, where there would be these life coaches I would see on Instagram. And I they would be doing something like, I think I saw someone like singing a song or doing a dance or something like that. And it was really interesting. It was really interesting to observe myself go, what the hell are they doing? What is that human doing? Such a strong judgment. And to be able to find the true halfway point of not too much positivity, but not too much negativity, and like this beautiful fulcrum of like understanding truly that person just is not saying the message in a way that is for me. But what is it about that person that I can admire? Well, they've put themselves on social media for a start. I mean, that's amazing. From someone who doesn't use social media, you know, and the idea of being public is not something I'm comfortable with. You know, I'm a very private person, I guess. You know, like that's commendable that they're putting themselves out there. And again, right back to the beginning, and they're being authentically themselves.
Are they?
I would assume so. At least they're on their way. You know, whether they're being someone else, and this is someone else that they've got to be to find themselves. So for me, it's all about unpicking the judgment and unpicking, because there are things inside me that's not in that person. All of those things are inside me. So when circling back all the way back to the actual question, you know, what is it in you where you feel like there's not enough? Your perspective is everything. Like, it's so powerful. It's so simple. It's like a life hack. It's like the gratitude thing. It kind of pairs with the gratitude thing. You know, what perspective have you actually got on this? What can you get? Where can you go? This is all crap and this is all like, you know, is it? Or can you sit with it for a second and just try and find the fulcrum where you can balance and go, is there something in this for me? Is there juice in this for me? And then, you know, for me, a lot of that, there's a lot of relaxation and calmness in letting that negation go.
There's an agitation that dissolves.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in that, then that frees up the energy to move.
Yeah.
And so that movement of energy is manifestation and work. And so while it may be frustrating, it takes the time it takes. Time's an illusion anyway. Maybe let's not go there, but you know what I mean? Like,
I do. There's something, what it feels like to me is like meeting those moments as they arise and recognizing, and this was like evident right through everything you just shared, that you have a creative control in the wonderment of the really good things and in how you meet the things that are uncomfortable too. One thing I'd add is like when you take that accountability, and what you're describing to me is witness consciousness, where you're able to, I'm going to observe this phenomenon as it comes in and what it does to my system. So creating a container for yourself to show up as you are. And as we get more and more sophisticated with that, I think it's true that we have intuitions about things. And you can go, let's say that there were wonderful parts in that of a person putting themselves out there in a way that you actually do admire when you strip out other details. And that's great because now you're holding it in a more positive way. That we've switched the momentum into which you're practicing an openness with this thing entering your space. You're the sucker that picked up the phone and is, you know, consuming.
yes.
And then this is what's happened. So you're meeting the moment as it arises. I think this is duality. For everything we like, there's going to be probably more. I was going to say there's going to be an opposite for everything you're passionate about, there's something that repels you. And it's probably much more than that too. But if we look at it dualistically, meaning the two, then if you note that that person's putting themselves out there and it feels really good to notice the good thing. I think that there's a bigger picture as well when you go, that person's putting themselves out there. There's some stuff they're doing I'm not resonant with, which is a bit repellent. I love the discernment between repulsion. Sorry, that something's repellent versus it's repulsive. Repulsive has like a real guttural
sting in it.
Whereas repellent can just feel like demagnetization. It's kind of neutral in its way, but it's also real. It also does have a vector direction, you know? So where you're like, okay, well, if that's repellent to me, that pushes me away, and that means the opposite lights me the fuck up. So we allow ourselves to have our intuition. And if you're establishing that kind of witnessing and welcoming in the moment, it feels so decharged from any personal judgment, then you can actually go, I think that feels a little inauthentic. And I know that because it feels icky in my system. And that means that authenticity is inversely proportional toward bliss in the opposite direction. So for every unit of measurement of inauthenticity, I am lit up by authenticity in the other direction. And without without like a forced discipline that's inauthentic all by itself, without forcing yourself to slap a happy face sticker on that moment, you've actually created a moment of gratitude. Thank you for showing me what I'm really lit up about. That's what comes up for me as you describe that.
If I was going to play devil's advocate,
Devil's avocado, I think.
yes. Is it the authenticity in them that you're reacting to, or is it that if you were to do that, you would be being inauthentic?
Perhaps, but it may not matter.
Because how do you judge somebody else's authenticity?
I think what I'm describing discernment rather than judgment.
Sorry,
when
yeah,
it's done well, no, it doesn't. The clarity is important because it can be. I feel certain them going, oh my God, this guy, you know, or whatever. I think it's quite easy to say, well, it's quite true, observably true to say that there are aspects of myself when I'm inauthentic that I don't like, and that's bringing that up for me. But there's a granulation in this where we don't want to be so, where we let our own intuition in as well. So if somebody enters your life and there's a darkness that you feel, and then we're like, oh, I don't want to adopt a judgmental posture here because that'll be shitty and it's not my favorite part of myself. But they're entering your community or your family or whatever, and you can kind of feel that. There's a sanctity and a fierce beauty in working with that intuition and having a vigilance of discernment where you close certain doors of access to yourself and your people in and around that. And in the same way, you could be like, I don't mind that these people exist. It's totally about the life they've lived. I'm not pointing fault, but it's like that vibration, that energy signature is likely to behave in resonant ways with that energy signature. So there's another step to this, I think, that's trusting our intuition. And the more you do it, the more you realize it's actually not judgmental. It's not like I'm making that wrong because that would bleed your energy out.
Totally.
The metaphor I like to play with is like, there's only one of us in the room. So when we stand in judgment of something else in the universe, we're cutting off our limbs, an appendage, and wondering why we feel so disempowered. That would be that. Now, there's an advanced nuance to this, I think, where you are allowing your intuition to move through. There are unconscious energies that aren't very well resourced and will take from other if they can. Is it their fault? No. Do they have some free will? Perhaps. Do you have any control over that? Nada. So what are you going to do? You've got to follow. You've developed all the spiritual practice and self-work you might do through psychology or relationship, whatever, is polishing the glass of your inner lens so you can see better and better and better and better. And one of the cues is you feel more and more, one of the key points of evidence to that end is you feel more and more love for everybody all the time. To the end that you can see somebody who's functioning from a relatively dark place, like a relatively, I'm going to take rather than give, and something more parasitic than symbiotic. Those things exist and they're not evil, but they are what they are in that given moment. And a lot of the time you polish that glass and now you can feel them. There are certainly areas of spiritual community where there's too much angels and demons and judgment about that stuff, but it's not nothing either.
To the inverse, there's also way too much flowering over everything. Hippie love child, everything's all cool, man.
Totally. Yeah. And this is where your logical brain re-enters. This is how we enlighten our logic because it still plays out. The sort of flowery stuff you're alluding to me is spiritual bypass, something we've discussed at length a lot lately, but where you're leaning too hard into your infinite, the part that can't be hurt, the part that was never born, never dies, can't be hurt. But we're here to experience a lot of finite. It's at least half the story. And it's so, you realize the true power in what it is to live forever, like the soul aspect of you, for those of us that can entertain that idea. You realize the value of that through realizing that we can die. We can die early. We can die an emotional death from overexposing ourselves to energies that don't serve us. All these things. It's a wonderfully rugged journey. And the rigor, I don't know if rugged and rigor are sort of like synonymous in that way, but the rigor of it all is what gives it value, is what gives it the form. It's what informs the value of these divine aspects of ourselves that can't really be hurt. Yeah, so I think it's beautiful to meet the moment And yes, to not make enemies with the phenomenon of life. So if a darker person or energy or whatever enters your life, I'm not crazy about the word darker, but something that can actually harm you. Like we don't let our kids swim by the riverbank ever in Northern Territory. Because of crocodiles, for anyone who's not been to Northern Territory. There's wonderful reason for that. And that's not saying crocodiles are fucked, fuck them, evil. No, crocodiles are crocodiles. They're absolutely majestic, amazing creatures. I'm so glad they exist. And part of their value is their fearsomeness, is their destructiveness, because that informs the value of, like in a crazy way, our children are made more valuable because they can be snapped up like that. They're more precious, and we get a deeper experience of their value because of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the both endness of that topic that we just crossed across. I think that's sick.
I didn't even know this. This is a great question. Ben has asked a question. This is a really good one. Is there a soul? Why don't Buddhists believe in a soul? Do they actually believe in a soul but conceptualize it differently? I didn't know that. Do Buddhists not believe in a soul? Or do you,
I don't
is that
have
you?
a good answer.
Okay.
No. Sorry, I don't have a good answer to your question, but I'm happy to address that as best I can. I'm sure something will pour out that'll have some value to someone. Well, I don't know that, but I feel like I could give it a go.
Give it a crack.
Can you reread it for me?
Yeah, sure. Ben asks, is there a soul? Why don't Buddhists believe in a soul? Do they actually believe in a soul but conceptualize it differently?
Yeah. So I'm not an expert on Buddhism.
You're more Hindu vibes, right?
Well, sure, but I feel increasingly non-denominational as the years roll by, because again, I think that these pathways are methods that you use. You use one thorn to rip out the other thorn, and you throw both away. And as I'm becoming less a Hindu, I'm becoming more and more myself, and that continues to happen indefinitely, and you feel sort of blissfully non-denominational. But that doesn't mean that you don't have reverent regard for these beautiful things that still exist. One thing I think is amazing is like the New Age integrates so much stuff. I think that seekers of today are writing today's scripture. So if you think about Gautama Buddha, who's the dude at the helm of Buddhism.
You know the first name of Buddha?
I do.
Yeah, I had no idea he had a first name.
Well, I think the discernment is because there's lots of different enlightened cats that are regarded as Buddhas, which is like awakened one.
Right. But Gautama was the first Buddha.
He's a Hindu, just like Christ is a Jew. This is the historical component, I suppose, as I understand it. And but reflectively, I think he broke a lot of things that were considered dogmatic by him in Hinduism. It's like we've become so dry and so caste orientated, and he broke that out. But of course it happens in northern India, and I'm certainly uncomfortable speaking as any expert on Buddhism, but I think that there's a quote from the Buddhist sphere that's something like Buddhism, well, perhaps I won't quote, but a comparison. Hinduism has 1 million gods to define, to give infinity structure. There's so many aspects of God that they just keep creating more and more and more and more. And then Buddhism encounters the same infinity and says, someone asked Buddha, why don't we give a definition to God? It's like, that would be like taking the densest jungle that ever existed and shining a single candle light inside of it. And just what the light casts illumination upon, we call that God, which would be to fall pathetically short of what God actually is. So Hinduism just has infinite numbers of gods to define it, and Buddhism has none. That's what comes up when I think about the soullessness of things. So much of Buddhism, as I've experienced it through retreats and sitting with teachers and stuff, is around the disillusion of self, so that all the pain in the world comes from the fact that you individuate. That is one school of thought around it. So the dissolving of ego, the moving away from desire. So if you think about that lending itself to there isn't a soul, because at our core there's only one of us in the room. I think that's probably the cleanest way to address the question. I think that once there's enough consciousness, the desire actually becomes a thread to pull joyously and reverently and to pull apart with joy and reverence indefinitely. I think when you really get in touch with yourself and you're on some sort of track where you're becoming more and more yourself every year that passes, the things you desire become more and more interesting. As if, to me, it's less about dissolving an ego and in terms of enlightening one. So God dwells in me as me. So it's how much infinity can I allow to move through my personality? How much God can I allow to move through? And so the desires from that point become creativity itself. Like, to me, the reason the universe goes to all the trouble of existing in a lot of ways is so that God can experience God's self through all these different individuations. So that I want to experience the abundance of God, which is to say that no matter what happens, there will be more than enough, because I am more than enough. This is like sort of strikingly easy to experience. If you can get into some sort of, you might say, beginner level meditation where you just find a window of emptiness, just a window of peace, you'll notice that in that empty space of, nothing, like there's thoughtlessness or whatever, or maybe it's a moment where you're observing thought and noticing you're actually disconnected from this constant flow of mind stuff manifest as thought. So you can either be watching it and that's spacious, or it could just actually be empty. But in that emptiness, you can ask, like, does this need anything added to it? I've never asked a person who said yes. So whatever we are underneath all this noise is inherently full and needs nothing added to it. That to me is not as a thought exercise, but as a feeling and experience exercise, is a way we can experience that we are this infinity, that we are inherently abundant in whatever, in terms of connection, something that all human beings need, in terms of sustenance, shelter, health, abundance, financially, let's say. Yeah.
Beautiful. Love it. Should we leave it there?
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. That was great fun.
Ep1 done.